back with another episode of The Way I See It. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe.
Oftentimes, when we talk about the practice of African slave trading, we only think about the transatlantic slave trade of Africans, with Portugal being credited with being one of the first recognized European countries to engage in that practice, followed by Britain and the United States. However, as horrific as the transatlantic slave trade was, the trading of Africans for slavery is an atrocity that extends over many centuries, well beyond the 400 plus years often mentioned when discussing the enslavement of Nubians from the African continent. Well over 1,000 years prior to the transatlantic slave trade into Europe, there was already an Arab Trans-Saharan slave trading of Africans, and by many accounts, it still persists in some form or fashion to this very day, even though slavery by law is technically illegal. This gives new light to the often contentious encounters between African Americans and Arab immigrants in the United States. Could behind those grins displayed by the cashier while accepting your money for goods you purchase in your neighborhood Arab-owned convenience stores hide a centuries-old deep-rooted disdain for you and anyone that looks like you? Think about that the next time you visit your neighborhood store and the man behind the counter says, "Thank you, brother," while putting your money in his cash register. While it may be true that the inhumane practice of slavery is not exclusive to the African, I would argue that no other group of people have been more impacted and targeted by it. Historically and factually, there is no equivalent. The estimated several million Africans enslaved and traded in the transatlantic slave trade pales in comparison to the estimated 50 million Africans enslaved during the Arab Trans-Saharan slave trade. In fact, the exploitation of Africans by Arabs is still pervasive to this day. As you watch this video, there are countless impoverished Africans being deceived and lured to the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia under the false pretense that they will be treated humanely and paid a fair wage for domestic work such as housekeeping that will in turn provide the means for them to send money back home to help their children and families. But all too often, this is not the case. There are many documented accounts by Africans, particularly from women, of being sexually assaulted, abused, and having their passports taken from them upon arrival by the host family, also being denied use of a phone for communication with their family, as well as being denied basic decency, such as a bed to sleep in. There have also been many documented incidents where the African domestic workers have had their passports withheld by the initial host family and traded like cattle or sold to another family, leaving them at an incomprehensible disadvantage. Imagine being in a foreign country with no passport and unable to speak the language of the land. What do you do? What can you do? That's a question that many Africans in this precise predicament are faced with at this very moment. This gives a new meaning to the old cliche our elders used to say back in the day when we complained about things as kids, that no matter how bad you think things are at the time, there's always someone else that's got it worse than you. To those of you that were unaware, this may come as a surprise, but the contempt for Africans by Arabs is not a new phenomenon. Dating back to the 7th century, 652 CE, with the Arab-sponsored Block Treaty, formalizing the slave trading of Nubians well into the 19th century before it became illegal. The exploitation of Nubians by Arabs began in the 7th century when the Ottoman Empire, whom were Muslims, invaded North Africa, which at the time was occupied by Rome. After they gained control of the region, they instituted Islamic religion, and many of the people that refused to convert were persecuted, enslaved, or just plain killed. Even though, by law today, slavery is technically outlawed, there is substantial documented evidence that suggests that this despicable behavior is still being perpetuated by a considerable amount of the Arabian population. I can remember at one point in time before I became enlightened, naively, I thought that as people of color, we all had this unspoken understanding of unilateral alliance in regards to social issues and injustice. However, once you learn history, there ain't no mystery. The more you do your due diligence to understand what was, the more you'll overstand what is and also what will be. The 2024 presidential election campaign in the United States really exposed the racism that is still widely present here in America today. Having said that, it is not my intent to imply that I was under the illusion that racism no longer existed in this country, but rather to highlight the obvious uptick in racially charged crimes and the noticeable increase in people around the country who now seemingly feel more emboldened to display blatant racist behavior and also be shameless while asserting their contempt for other ethnic groups. This behavior has not been exclusive to white Americans. It's being displayed and discussed by all races across the country. It would not be unreasonable for one to speculate that Donald Trump's racist political rhetoric may be a significant contributing factor to the current racially charged social and political climate. The 2024 presidential election was also in part eye-opening as it provided a glimpse into the racist views also held by many other minority groups, as it became apparent that the prospect of having a biracial African Indian female president was not only incomprehensible for a large number of white Americans, but also for a large part of the non-black minority population in America.
Fuck you guys.
The purpose of this video is not to promote or encourage hate or dislike or evil or violence against any particular racial or ethnic group. It is merely for enlightenment for the African and African American here in America. My only objective is to provide context to the current political and social climate of the country today. Want to hear more? Like and subscribe and stay up to date with the way I see it. Thank you for watching.